home as they have the right to do, and yet the act of a Secretary of Interior took it away from them arbitrarily. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Berman.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong support of the Peters Amendment. Without this amendment, the bill will undermine the protections currently in place for wild species under the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. In this case, the hunters who chose to kill these polar bears knew they were taking a risk. They had good information that polar bears would be listed as an endangered, threatened species under the Endangered Species Act and acted contrary to it. They were repeatedly warned by federal agencies and hunting associations that the final listing would cut off imports immediately, and they had well over a year's notice. Despite this knowledge, hunters still chose to shoot and kill polar bears at a time when the species faced severe hardship and legal protections were imminent. We should not encourage a small group of people to take conscious risks and then turn around and ask Congress for relief. If we pass this bill without the Peters Amendment, we are in effect telling hunters that when species are likely candidates for the endangered or threatened lists, kill them as soon as you can, and then Congress will give you special treatment and exempt you from the law. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the Peters Amendment. Don't destroy the long-term conservation efforts for the special interest of a few trophy hunters hoping for home decor and bragging rights. I will strongly oppose the underlying bill.
Gentleman from Alaska.
I'm surprised my good friend from California. He has a lot of polar bears in California. It's really amazing to me. Doesn't know squat about the population of polar bears. And to have the, imply that these are rich people going to hunt, as if, now, isn't that class warfare? Exactly Democrat position. The idea that now this is wrong when they did it legally. And these bears weren't all killed in 2008. And they weren't all warned in 2008. I want to see the documentation of that. You know there's no documentation. That's the same propaganda you get out of the same groups of people that are anti-gun and anti-hunting. Yes, step up to the plate, that's what you are. I know that. But to take that right away from an American citizen, especially a wounded veteran, 2 of them, take that right away from him is wrong. That is wrong when this is legally taken species arbitrarily by a secretary saying now they're threatened, and by the way, the administration does not oppose this bill. That's amazing. Fish and Wildlife Hastings supports this bill now because we made some changes that they wanted and we gave them, specifically recognizing does not encourage hunting. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
I'd like to yield 2 minutes for the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, notwithstanding the statement of my very good friend from Alaska, I rise in support of Mr. Peters' amendment. It would remove a provision that would allow for the importation of polar bears killed in Canada. But the provision only benefits 41 big game hunters who shot bears in Canada prior to their listing as a species threatened with extinction. These hunters were on notice that the trophies would likely not be allowed into the United States, but rushed to hunt the bears anyway. Now they're asking for Congress to bail them out by creating an exemption in the Endangered Species Act so they can bring their trophies into the country. It's not about the number of polar bears. It is about the underlying principle that decisions related to the protection of threatened and endangered animals should be based upon science and subject to consistent enforcement, not dependent upon the whims of Congress. Polar bears are already threatened, and the last thing they need is for more trophy hunters chasing them down and shooting them. But that's exactly what will happen if this Congress demonstrates that it is fully willing to retroactively change the law in this manner to accommodate the wishes of a very small minority. 41 big game hunters, and we got to be here changing the law on their account? The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a federal court have rejected previous requests to import trophies after 2008. That should be the final word on this subject. So I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on the Peters Amendment, and I yield to Mr. Peters the remainder of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan's time has expired.
Again, we have a gentleman from Virginia has lots of
Gentleman from Alaska has 1.5 minutes remaining.
The gentleman from Virginia has lots of polar bears in Virginia. I know it's springtime, but I don't think there's many polar bears in Virginia. Strangely to say, all three of them have said endangered species. This has nothing to do with endangered species. This is about marine mammals. Marine mammals. Endangered species, in fact, are still imported into the United States. Hartmann mountain zebras? Yes. The African elephants? Yes. We can still import those. This is to do with the marine mammals. I really can't understand, because the government warns you. It's not against the law, but they warn you. But you better follow it because we're warning you. Now, that's not law. These people may have been notified there's a possibility, but they've hunted under existing law, under existing permits, and paid for. Now to take that away from them, I don't care if it's one person or 500 people or 4,100 people, 41 people, when the law is followed and we don't follow through with it, then shame on us. These people did what was right and legally. Now you're trying to take that right away from them. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman is the only one that has time remaining. Gentleman from Michigan's time has expired.
How much more time I got?
Gentleman has 15 seconds.
Good, 15 seconds. I urge a strong, resounding no on this amendment, and vote for the people of America to have right under the Constitution as long as they follow the law to do something that's correct, and they've done that. They did everything by the law. And to say now to have an amendment and say you don't have a right when they followed it correctly is shame on you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the Chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, record roll call.
Michigan. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report 112-444. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment that's been made in order.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report Number 112-444, offered by Mr. Fleming of Louisiana.
Resolution 614, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Fleming, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment today maintains the state of Louisiana's ability to regulate hunting within its borders. In a decision announced March 1st, 2012, the Forest Service regional forester located way over in Atlanta, Georgia, went over the heads of the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Commission to forever prohibit the use of dogs to hunt deer in Kisatchie National Forest. Deer hunting has a long and important cultural history within the state of Louisiana. When French settlers first came to Louisiana in the 18th century, Louisiana was covered by thickets and dense timber. Most of these settlers had companion dogs with them, but the most treasured were the deer hounds. The use of dogs would help the hunter drive the deer out of the forest because deer were so plentiful and provided exciting races that provided sound nourishment. Hunting in many forms has been for decades and continues to be a compatible activity on the 600,000-acre Kisatchie National Forest. Oddly enough, the regional forester does not prohibit the use of dogs for hunting raccoon, squirrel, rabbit, and game birds. In 2011, the Kisatchie dog deer season was only 9 days and only applies to certain ranger districts. According to communication with the Forest Service, seven southern states allow hunting on national forest within their borders. They include Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, but in this case, not Louisiana. However, this is the first time the Forest Service has issued a ban on dog deer hunting or hunting deer with dogs within a specific state. According to the Forest Service itself, they indicate that revenue generated on dog deer hunting, including expenses to care for dogs, contributes to between approximately 18 to 29 direct jobs and results in roughly $890,000 to $1.4 million of income. By their own assessment, it is likely that some economic benefits will be lost depending on whether hunting with dogs for deer leave the area to pursue the sport elsewhere. Now it's about time. Now this is about to kill even more jobs in Louisiana. I would also like to emphasize that both the state of Louisiana, the NRA, and the Safari Club all support my amendment, and I urge support of this amendment. And I would like to yield at this time 30 seconds to the chairman of our committee, Natural Resources.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 30 seconds.
And I reserve my time after his 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Gentleman from
I
Washington
thank the gentleman for yielding and his talk and discussion about the long history and strong local support for this traditional form of hunting in his state. The primary purpose of this legislation is to limit unjustified federal bureaucratic limitations and restrictions on hunting and fishing in public lands. The circumstances that he has detailed demonstrate that his amendment fits squarely within the spirit of this bill, and I therefore support the amendment. It's important to recognize that it is the authority of states to regulate hunting and fishing. Individual federal agency personnel should not be substituting their opinion for the laws of the states, and I commend the gentleman and I urge adoption of the amendment.
The gentleman from Louisiana reserves the balance of his time.
Yes.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the Fleming Amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a few points that I really believe need to be made. The decision to eliminate dog deer hunting on this forest was made only after more than half a dozen public meetings, a comment period that resulted in 1,000 comments, which were thoroughly reviewed. In fact, the policy has been amended in response to those specific local concerns. The justification for this policy is not only to prevent trespassing, though this is one reason it is necessary. The forest has a checkerboard pattern of non-federal lands mixed in with federal land. Dog deer hunting results in deer running over long distances and hunters pursuing them and at times discharging firearms on the run. In an area with private homes, the Forest Service determined that this was simply too dangerous. The Forest has collected input from local residents and non-hunters who fear for their safety during dog deer hunting season. To be clear, while the decision was ultimately approved by the region in Atlanta, the policy was developed by the local Forest Service staff who work on the forest. Lastly, this amendment is redundant and wasteful because the rule already in place meets the requirements of the proposed amendment. The current rule already covers the smallest portion of forest possible because with the checkerboard lands, the rule must cover the entire forest to be effective. While public safety is the primary justification for this rule, preventing trespass is another reason for the rule and why it was put in place. The Fleming Amendment would throw out the current rule and then require a new rule that meets the exact same requirements. This is redundant, a waste of time and money. Finally, according to the Forest Service, the state of Louisiana already prohibits dog deer hunting on state lands. So this is simply consistent with state policy. This amendment should be defeated, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Louisiana has 1 3/4 minutes remaining.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to respond to some of the statements that were made. I received the petition of thousands of hunters from Louisiana and several states who wanted this to continue. The state, not the federal government, is in the best position to make this determination. By October 6, 2009, the forest land had received 1,237 responses to its 2009 request for comments. Of these, 320 agreed with the proposed prohibition, but 917 were against it. That's a 77% majority of these respondents who are actually from central Louisiana where this Kisatchie National Forest exists. During October 2011, the Forest Service received over 1,300 more comments on the original proposal and environmental analysis. All but 5 letters, Mr. Chairman, were opposed to the proposed prohibition. So again, I would reserve the remainder of my time.
Gentleman reserves the remainder of his time. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The contradiction, and with that I'll close, the contradiction is very important. The majority talks about local control, local control. In this instance, you have the state of Louisiana that has prevented this, that has prohibited this type of hunting on its lands, and that is a local decision to be honored. But it is okay to honor that decision, but on federal lands we want to make an exception and set a precedent. I would suggest that the contradiction in this amendment merits its defeat, and I would yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back the remainder of his time. Gentleman from Louisiana has 25 seconds, 45 seconds remaining.
Yeah, just want to respond again. Again, the people of Louisiana, the state of Louisiana is full support of doing away with this prohibition. This was a decision made by somebody in Atlanta, a federal person, that has to do with what is really a local issue. This is a tradition that goes back 300 years. And I think it's pretty obvious that the people of Louisiana support the continuance of hunting deer with dogs. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 6, printed in House Report 112-444. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in House Report number 112-444, offered by Mr. Bishop of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 614, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bishop, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
The purpose of my amendment is straightforward. It opens an area off the coast of my congressional district to recreational striped bass fishing. Striped bass is a popular game fish in New York, and it has long been an important catch for recreational fishermen. The formation of an exclusive economic zone creates a small area of federal water in the Block Island Sound between Montauk Point, Block Island, and Point Judith, Rhode Island. In most cases, when you hit the 3-mile point off the coast of the United States, you have nothing but federal waters in front of you. This is not always the case for New York fishermen. Because of this geographic anomaly, when the ban on striped bass fishing in the EEZ went into effect, it closed off 60% of New York's traditional striped bass recreation areas from fishing, according to the Montauk Boatmen and Captains Association in my district. The National Marine Fisheries Service recognized this unique area by designating it as a transit area where it was permissible for fishermen to possess striped bass on their boats as long as no fishing takes place while in the EEZ and the boat is in continuous transit. My amendment goes one step further and opens this relatively small area to recreational fishing. Mindful of the need for reasonable conservation, my amendment also provides the ability to take necessary action for conservation purposes. Fishermen and charter captains on Long Island know these waters better than anybody in Washington, D.C. Our friends on the other side of the aisle talk about government regulation stifling the economic recovery. After all, fishermen are job creators, both directly and indirectly. They hire crews, they have their boats maintained by mechanics, and they sell their catch to restaurants where Americans go out to eat. I support reasonable fisheries management that is designed to promote robust health of fish stocks. But as a representative for the oldest fishing ports in New York State, I also support sensible efforts to ensure our fishermen can fish and earn their livelihood. Opening this area would once again give recreational fishermen access to fruitful striped bass fishing grounds. Charter boats will benefit, as will the ports they depart from, as people come to the east end of Long Island for great fishing. This will promote job growth and tourism, which is the goal of the underlying legislation. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I'd be happy to yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. The Atlantic Striped Bass Conservation Act authorization appropriation expired at the end of fiscal year 2011. Our Fisheries Subcommittee intends to hold hearings on the reauthorization in this Congress. I think this would be the appropriate time and place to have the discussion which is the subject of your amendment. And listen, I understand the gentleman's concern. Believe me, we've heard other concerns on the Atlantic striped bass. If the gentleman would withdraw his amendment, I can assure him that he'll get a full hearing on the content of his amendment in our committee this year.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll yield back to the gentleman.
I very much appreciate that offer, Mr. Chairman, and based on your assurance that this issue will receive a full hearing in your committee or in the appropriate subcommittee, I will ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
I thank the gentleman yield. I thank you very much, and we will work together on this. This is a larger issue, and I certainly understand the gentleman's concerns.
Mr. Chairman,
back to him.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Without objection, the gentleman from New York's amendment is withdrawn. It is now in order to consider amendment number 7, printed in House Report 112-444. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in House Report number 112-444, offered by Mr. Heinrich of New Mexico.
Pursuant to House Resolution 614, the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Heinrich, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume. As an active sportsman, I'm proud to introduce this amendment today. It's likely that you've heard claims from some of my colleagues across the aisle that the manager's amendment will resolve the concerns that I raised today, thus making this amendment redundant or duplicative. But, Mr. Chairman, that is simply not the case. While I appreciate the intent of my colleagues to resolve my concerns, their language is still far too vague and needs additional clarification. As an avid hunter, I strongly support increasing access to public lands for hunting and fishing. But we can achieve that goal without eliminating the very wilderness protections that have protected some of the best wildlife habitat, and I would add some of the best backcountry hunting opportunities in our nation. The bill under consideration today would eliminate long-standing protections against logging, oil and gas drilling, and motor vehicle use in wilderness areas. It would create a loophole in the Wilderness Act for anything that would provide, quote, opportunities for hunting, fishing, and recreational shooting, unquote. Under the Wilderness Act, land managers are allowed to act in ways that are otherwise not allowed in wilderness areas, if the action is necessary for the minimum requirements necessary for the administration of the area. In practice, the minimum requirements necessary language and standard means that land managers can use motorized vehicles, chainsaws, even helicopters in extreme emergencies to fight fires, rescue stranded hikers, or remove downed trees from trails that threaten human safety. This bill would extend that kind of exemption to any action that would provide an opportunity for hunting, fishing, and recreational shooting. This means that activities otherwise not allowed in a wilderness area, like motor vehicle use, would now have to be permitted if it could be used to facilitate everyday activities, like hunting, fishing, and recreational shooting. Now, the manager's amendment includes language intended to address these concerns by providing that these provisions, quote, are not intended to authorize or facilitate commodity development, use, or extraction, or motor recreational access or use, unquote. Whether or not the bill's intention, it's the language in the bill that still allows for this possibility. And saying that wasn't the intent doesn't change what the language does. In contrast, my amendment provides that nothing in this bill, quote, shall be construed to allow these otherwise prohibited activities in wilderness areas. Intended versus shall, there is a very powerful legal difference, and sportsmen across the country recognize this difference and support my amendment. In the last few hours, I've heard from countless supporters in my own state, including the New Mexico Wildlife Federation, the New Mexico chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Doñana County Associated Sportsmen, the High Desert Sportsmen, and the Sportsmen Concerned of Northeast New Mexico, just to name a few. And nationally, we've heard from groups like the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership and TU. As the bill sponsors say that they are not trying to create sweeping exemptions to the Wilderness Act, I have no doubt that they'll support my amendment, as it clearly eliminates these loopholes that were unintentionally included in the bill text. As a backcountry hunter, I know how valuable wilderness is to hunters and anglers. and I hope my colleagues will continue to support protecting wildlife habitat in wilderness areas and vote for my amendment. Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, the section of the bill that applies to hunting and fishing in the wilderness areas was derived from the excellent bill that was offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Benishek. I have noticed that whenever a new wilderness designation bill is introduced and a subcommittee hearing is held, the sponsor testifies that his or her bill will not reduce hunting because hunting is clearly permitted in wilderness areas. And they are right. Nevertheless, when an anti-hunting group went to court recently to block hunting in the wilderness section of the National Forest in Michigan, the Forest Service had to waste a great deal of time and money justifying the hunting permitted there. Similarly, anti-hunting groups have sought to use the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, to entangle the land managing agencies in NEPA's briar patch when the agencies allow hunting activity on public land. Now, I'm certain that many would agree that hunting and fishing on public land is not a new major federal action that requires a full environmental impact statement. However, to protect sportsmen and to prevent the waste of resources that occurs when conservation dollars are diverted into defending against nuisance lawsuits, Dr. Benishek's provision gives clear statutory support to legitimacy of hunting on public land. I believe from the beginning that the Benishek bill dealt only with hunting and fishing. It never authorized motorized travel or extractive industries, even though some environmental activist groups quickly made that accusation. But to allay any genuine concerns people may have, we worked closely with a wide array of conservation groups and decided to include in the manager's amendment that was passed a provision that explicitly states that the relevant portions of the bill, and I quote from the amendment, are not intended to authorize or facilitate commodity development, use or extraction or motorized recreational access or use, end quote. With that very direct language, I can honestly say that virtually every major conservation group that is not anti-hunting supports the bill. I don't have time to read the whole list, but it does include the NRA, the Safari Club, the Bipartisan Congressional Sportsman Caucus, the U.S. Sportsmen's Alliance, Ducks Unlimited, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So I think that H.R. 4089, as amended, now has the support of the entire range of sportsman conservation groups, ranging from those considered conservatives to those that are quite liberal and do not believe that the wilderness section needs any additional changes as offered by the gentleman's amendment from New Mexico. Again, the concerns expressed by the gentleman from New Mexico in support of his amendment, in my view, are unfounded. This bill deals squarely with hunting and fishing and does not authorize motorized travel or mining or other such activities in wilderness areas. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I'd like to yield 2 friends to my good friend and colleague and the sportsman from northern New Mexico, Mr. Lujan.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I rise in support of the Heinrich Amendment. And I want to thank my friend from New Mexico for offering this amendment to ensure protection of our wilderness areas. Mr. Chairman, I'm from the western United States, and I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a hunter and a fisherman. My family raised sheep and cattle on allotments in the area where I was raised. Like many other states in the West, we New Mexicans value our access to public lands for hunting, fishing, shooting, and recreational enjoyment. I want to make sure that everyone understands that I'm not opposed to everything in this bill, but I do have specific concerns with language that would create a loophole in the Wilderness Act. This loophole will undermine one of the defining laws that protects public lands and enables us to have pristine areas to hunt and fish, critical areas that should be preserved for future generations to enjoy. But this bill, as written, walks a dangerous line. I had concerns in the committee markup of this bill, and today I reiterate these concerns, specifically language in Section 104E, which opens up for interpretation to allow motorized vehicles in sensitive areas, completely undermining the effort to protect these lands. Although the majority has indicated that they have clarified this problem in the manager's amendment, a CRS memorandum issued on April 13, 2012 on Section 104E of H.R. 4089 has confirmed my concern that Section 104E could lead to motorized use and inappropriate commercial activities in congressional designated wilderness areas. If the majority states through the Manager's Amendment that their intention is not to open up these areas for motorized vehicles, then let's make absolutely sure that this won't happen. I'm glad to see that they see that there's a problem as well, which they've attempted to address, but sadly, the loosely amended amendment won't accomplish that. Let's work together to support the Heinrich Amendment and make sure that we don't separate, Mr. Chairman, that we don't combine motorized vehicles with Second Amendment issues in our backyards. I think we can work together, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired. Gentleman from New Mexico's time has expired. Gentleman from Washington has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Chairman, did I understand that all the time has expired on their side?
That's correct.
I yield myself the balance of the time. It appears that the argument here is that this language that we drafted and passed in the Manager's Amendment is not strong enough. Let me read the appropriate words. In the gentleman from New Mexico's amendment, he says that he focuses on the word shall, which of course is strong language, but he follows it with construed. Now, that raises a question. Construed by whom? Our language says very specifically that nothing in here is intended to authorize, facilitate any use regarding extraction. We say that is the intent of the law, very specifically. When you use the word construed, I dare say, Mr. Chairman, that you are opening this wide open to litigation, and maybe that is exactly what the gentleman intended. By focusing on shall, he doesn't focus on the operative word, which is construed, because construed can be used by anybody outside in order to sue. We say very specifically, even though we didn't think extraction was part of this underlying legislation, but we say very specifically it's not intended to reinforce it. That was the reason that provision was in the Manager's Amendment. So I urge my colleagues to defeat the Heinrich Amendment. With that, I yield back the time.
Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 8, printed in House Report 112-444. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to offer an amendment which would add another positive element.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in House Report number 112-444, offered by Mrs. Foxx of North Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 614, the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Mrs. Foxx, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a supporter of H.R. 4089, I rise today to offer an amendment which would add another positive element to the underlying bill. As we all know, the Antiquities Act of 1906 authorized the President to designate national monuments on federal lands that contain historical, landmark structures, or other objects of scientific interest. This authority has been used 129 times by presidents of both parties to designate such national treasures as the Grand Canyon, Grand Teton, and the Statue of Liberty. As someone who's enjoyed and appreciated some of the abundance of natural and historic treasures throughout this great country, I greatly appreciate the importance of protecting these great blessings. Currently, a national monument designation allows for the President to impose unilaterally further restrictions on the use of federal lands. Since state authorities are more aware of the local circumstances affecting land restrictions, I've authored a standalone bill, H.R. 302, the Preserve Land Freedom for Americans Act of 2011, which is a model for the amendment I'm now offering. This amendment provides for accountability to the process by requiring the approval of the legislatures and governors of the states where monuments are proposed to be located. With the federal government currently owning such a large percentage of land throughout the country, particularly in western states, it's important to respect and allow state policymakers to weigh in on proposed federal land restrictions within their borders. With that, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I rise in strong opposition to the Foxx Amendment and in strong support of the National Monuments and Antiquities Act. Following in the footsteps of Teddy Roosevelt, who used the Antiquities Act to protect the Grand Canyon, and Franklin Roosevelt, who used it to protect the Grand Tetons. 16 presidents, 8 Republicans, and 8 Democrats have used the Antiquities Act to designate approximately 130 national monuments. In most recent history, President George W. Bush used the Antiquities Act to designate the largest national monument in history. Most recently, President Obama used the act to preserve an enormously popular Fort Monroe in Virginia. These special places might have been lost to development or destruction had the 59th Congress not authorized presidents to use the Antiquities Act to move quickly to protect federal lands. And this is worth repeating. The Antiquities Act allows designation of national monuments on federal land only. This land is already owned by the federal government, and the claim that there is some kind of land grab going on is totally false. Our national monuments are valuable, popular tourism designations that serve as powerful economic engines. Headwaters Economics studied 17 large national monuments in 11 western states and found positive impacts to local economies and employment. The Antiquities Act has served present and future generations well for more than a century, and there is no need for this amendment. National monuments do not harm private property rights. They improve the quality of life in surrounding communities, and while saving historic, cultural, and scenic resources for our children and our grandchildren. The Foxx Amendment will hobble the Antiquities Act by giving states a veto over federal designations on federal land, and it would do so based on criticisms of the Act and of national monuments that are patently false. The Foxx Amendment should be defeated, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I now yield 40 seconds to the distinguished Chairman of the committee, Mr. Hastings.
Gentleman recognized for 40 seconds.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Unfortunately, the Antiquities Act is used more often than not to circumvent Congress's role in setting land use policy or to foreclose any opportunity for anyone outside the White House to participate in whatever decision they make, including the affected states. Unlike America in 1906, when the Antiquities Law was first enacted, we now have an elaborate set of other laws and regulations that require deliberative procedures to be followed before any significant action affecting public lands can be taken. I think the gentlelady's amendment would improve this process, and with that I support it, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Arizona.
I yield the remaining time to the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Heinrich.
Gentleman from New Mexico is recognized for 2 3/4 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, for more than a century, the Antiquities Act has given American presidents the authority to protect some of our nation's most important and threatened places. Across my state of New Mexico, we see the benefits of the Antiquities Act. Bandelier National Monument, Carlsbad Caverns National Park, White Sands National Monument, and El Morro National Monument, all originally protected through the Antiquities Act. Research done last year by the New Mexico Green Chamber of Commerce shows that New Mexico's 10 national monuments established through the Antiquities Act account for 1.3 million annual tourist visits and $54 million in annual tourist spending, supporting over 1,000 New Mexico jobs. In the last few weeks, countless New Mexicans, including sportsmen like myself, have asked President Obama to designate a new national monument to protect the Organ Mountains outside Las Cruces, New Mexico. We are calling on our President to protect our vulnerable natural and cultural resources in southern New Mexico through the Antiquities Act. This amendment, offered by my colleague from North Carolina, would take that power away from the President and give state legislatures the power to make decisions about public lands that belong to all Americans. The Antiquities Act was specifically designed to allow presidents to respond quickly to places in the national interest. Had the Antiquities Act been written with the language of this amendment, the Grand Canyon could have been overrun by sprawl. Ancient cliff dwellings in the Petrified Forest National Park might have been looted, and Arches National Park probably wouldn't exist. An additional concern is that several state legislatures only meet for a limited number of days each year and can't respond to urgent threats to public lands. In my state, we only meet for 60 days in odd years and 30 days in even years. The Foxx Amendment would prevent archaeological, cultural, and historical sites from receiving the urgent protections they need. It also doesn't recognize that the United States has vast areas of unincorporated territory that is not under the jurisdiction of any state legislature. President George W. Bush used the Antiquities Act to protect lands and waters in unincorporated federal areas, including the Marianas Trench Marine and Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monuments. National monuments should not be a partisan issue. After being signed into law by President Theodore Roosevelt, 16 presidents of both parties, 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats, have used this act to protect federally owned lands and waters to better protect America's treasures for future generations. And by attaching this divisive issue to this bill, the chances of a presidential veto are greatly increased. I hope that we would refrain from endangering the pro-sportsman portions of this bill with controversial issues like this one. As an active sportsman, I strongly support the Antiquities Act. I ask for a no vote on the amendment, and I would yield back the balance of my time to the gentleman from Arizona.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman's time has expired from Arizona. Gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my distinguished colleague from Utah, Mr. Bishop.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Antiquities Act, which allows the President to designate land, is a legislative function that the legislature gave to the executive branch in Teddy Roosevelt's time. Whether it is good or not, it is wrong for Congress to give its authority away to the executive branch. At the time, it was thought it would be okay because there were specific restrictions placed on it. You had to have a specific something, geological, historical, that you were going to preserve. It was in imminent danger, and it was going to be on the smallest area possible in the debate that was going to be over a couple of 100 acres. The unfortunate thing is presidents since that time have used this monument designation power for political purposes in areas quite bigger than that. The last monument that was created in my state was not a couple 100 acres. It was bigger than the states of Connecticut, Delaware, and Rhode Island combined. It was done at 9 a.m. after the governor of the state was told about it at 2 a.m. after having been told the earlier day that nothing was going to happen in this kind of an area. Earlier this year, the Antiquities Act was used at Fort Monroe when the entire delegation and the local community were in favor of it. When ours was done, as well as many of the other Antiquity Act monuments were done, the local delegation was not in favor of it, the governor was not in favor of it, everyone was not in favor of it. What her amendment tries to do is simply say, look, if you're going to keep this power with the president, at least give a check and balance system somewhere. Let's make sure that the local people, the state people, are fine with this designation before the president does something arbitrarily, capriciously, and unfortunately, too often for political reasons. Keep the legislative power where it should be with the legislature, but at least if you're not going to do that, at least put some kind of logical check and balance on the system. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentlewoman from North Carolina has 45 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my 2 colleagues who spoke on behalf of my amendment and tell them how much I appreciate their comments. And I want to say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, if designating an area as a national monument would be such a good idea, there shouldn't be any problem with gaining approval from the legislatures and the governor, and it takes no power away from the president but allows the states to be part of the process. I encourage my colleagues to support my amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Arizona.
On that, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee do now rise. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises. Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 4089, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that that committee has had under consideration H.R. 4089 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.
The House is gaveled out so members can attend a cybersecurity briefing.